In this section, we are going to talk about how to write your research methodology. Now, a research methodology in a research paper and in a research thesis is quite different from each other. Although both of them might include similar things, but since a research thesis is much more detailed, so you can add much more detail into a research thesis. But for research paper, you only get maybe half a page to write your research methodology. So you have to do it in a very concise and concrete manner. I hope that these things that we highlight in this session would help you understand how to write a research methodology for your thesis and a research paper. Now, the first thing, which is not actually a necessity for a research paper, is your nature of research. So when you are writing your thesis, you should mention that what's the nature of your research. This is particularly important when you are conducting or when you have conducted a survey-based research for your thesis. So whether your research is qualitative or quantitative, and what makes it quantitative or qualitative, this is particularly important. The next thing is you identify the population for your research. Who are the potential set of elements from which you could have or you wanted to collect the data. For instance, if you are interested in higher education in Pakistan or maybe in any other country, so all students that are a part of the higher education system are your population or maybe teachers. But moving from this, the next thing is you have to identify the sample. What was the sample size? Now it's important that you just do not just mention that, okay, this was our sample size. You have to explain the reason why did you reach at this sample size. This is particularly important in thesis. In paper, obviously you just mention your sample size. You do not need to explain how you reach at this sample size. It's particularly important in both thesis and research paper that you mention your sampling technique. And maybe a line or two in research paper, but a bit more detail about why this sampling technique was chosen. Now, the next thing is your questionnaire. How did you collect the data? Now, if you are doing a survey-based study, a primary data, how did you collect the data? Or how do you plan to collect the data? What are the sources of the questionnaire? In case of secondary data, you mention the sources for secondary data. But it's very important here to note that when you are doing or when you plan to collect primary data through questionnaires, you should use reliable and valid questionnaires. I've seen in my experience that sometimes students just go on the internet, Google or any other search engine, search through those search engine, and whatever they could find as a questionnaire, they try to use it. Now, research is a systematic process. So if you are using something in that systematic process, that particular source, that particular questionnaire should have come from a systematic process. So always use reliable and valid questionnaires. Sometimes a student use questionnaires from existing thesis, something that is available in existing thesis. Obviously, you should go at the source of that particular questionnaire, from where they or the thesis writer or the scholar adapted or adopted the questionnaire. Do not just copy and paste the questionnaire from wherever it is available. Always go to the source. This is particularly important. Now, obviously, if you are writing a paper and you cannot obviously present the whole questionnaire, you should present example items from the questionnaire. One item or two items from each construct. But if it's a thesis, obviously the whole questionnaire should be presented in appendix. Now, how the questionnaire was distributed? What were your data collection techniques? Did you personally visit them? Did you obviously put the questionnaire on the internet? If you personally visited the people, what time or how you visited them? And obviously it is very important to let the reader know that was it a administered questionnaire. So everything related to when the questionnaire was distributed, how the questionnaire was distributed, and how the data was collected, this should be mentioned in both thesis and both papers as well, in paper as well. Now, what was the structure of the questionnaire? You normally start with demographics And then obviously you mention or you ask the respondents about your constructs. And what Likert scale did you use? So you mentioned the anchors of the Likert scale as well. Following this, you should mention the summary of the respondents. What was the gender or the percentage of male and females? Age groups might be. If you collected data from different companies in different sectors, so how many companies in each sector in case of secondary data? What analysis techniques did you use and why did you use them? You have to give solid reason as to why did you use. Now it is important, how do you find that, okay, why did I use this? The best and simplest answer is you go to existing research, published research in good academic journals, and give reference that, okay, this technique or this particular technique is useful for this particular model or this type of model. And then these research papers in this area have already used this technique. And finally, if you are doing a secondary data, or you are working in the area of finance or economics, obviously you should present your econometric model or regression model. Now here are a few examples of research methodologies published in a research paper. So this is a paper I recently published with my co-authors in International Journal of Hospitality Management. If you look at the methodology section, it's not detailed, it's just single page or half a page actually. So we obviously started with, okay, how the hypotheses were tested. They were tested using this particular software. This sampling technique was used. The data was collected from September 2018 to January 2019 through personal visits and through online questionnaire distribution. And now, since we did collected data from different countries, how many questionnaires were distributed, how many were returned, how many were useful, and then in each country the response rate, and a bit about demographics. Okay, and the sample size, and whether or not this sample size is enough for the technique or not. So this is what you mentioned here. And then, since it was in different countries, what was the language of the questionnaire and how did we validate the questionnaire in each country? And then the sources of the questionnaire, everything in there. So this is how obviously the questionnaires were they adapted or adopted the Likert scale. So this is how you can present your methodology in a research paper. In research thesis, obviously it has to be much more detailed. Similarly, for financial research on finance, obviously you start with your data, your econometric model, your source of data obviously, and then the composition or the sample distribution across industries. This is particularly important. And then the variable, their description, the nature of the variable, whether it was purely categorical, numerical, continuous, and how did you measure the variables. So how each variable was measured, and obviously you can use different measures that are available. Then you need to mention the measures that were available and how they were utilized. So this is how you can write your research methodology in a thesis or in a paper. I hope the video would have helped you understand how to write the research methodology in a research paper or research thesis. Thank you very much.